Hey guys, tonight we are not going to look at bloody battles or terrifying tyrants. We are doing something far more relaxing and, frankly, far less exciting. We're going to slip back to the heart of the ancient world, not to the throne rooms, but to the dust, the heat, and the surprisingly gentle hum of a silk roots tavern. Imagine this with me. You've been on the road for what feels like 67 years, riding alongside a camel train that smells mostly of dried apricots and a desperate need for a bath. The sun is a relentless, vengeful orange ball sinking toward the horizon, painting the endless, beige desert in shades of burnt sienna and exhaustion. You trudge. Your robes are thick with fine sand that has somehow managed to work its way into places you didn't know existed, and the only sound is the rhythmic, heavy padding of camel hooves and the infuriatingly cheerful rattle of the little brass bells they wear. You're dehydrated, mildly sunburnt, and you are pretty sure you have just spent the last 2 days arguing with your caravan leader about the precise value of a bolt of Babylonian linen that may or may not be slightly mildewed. This is the reality of the silk routes, and here's your reality check. You probably won't survive this journey, not because of bandits or spectacular desert storms, although those do happen, but because of a slow, boring infection you got from drinking bad water 3 stops ago. But right now, you aren't thinking about that. You're focused on the horizon, because there, nestled where the sky touches the dune line, you see it, the faint outline of an oasis tavern. It's not a grand structure. It's a low, thick-walled building of sun-baked mud brick, perfectly designed to hoard the coolness inside. A single, flickering torch is already lit by the door, casting a long, welcoming shadow. The shift from the heat, the constant, dry wind, and the glaring light to the heavy, thick air of the inn's common room is a deeply physical shock, a moment of pure, unexpected relief. That sound you hear, it's the gentle creak of the heavy wooden door swinging shut behind you, instantly muffling the desert world outside. This quiet is a gift, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drop your pack, which thuds softly onto the packed earth floor. The air inside is still, cool, and carries the deep, comforting smell of smoke from a distant cooking fire, stale beer, and damp clay. You stand there for a moment, letting your eyes adjust to the low light cast by small oil lamps scattered around. The tavern owner, a man whose face is a roadmap of desert wrinkles, merely nods a slow greeting. There's no rush, no loud welcome, just the unspoken understanding that you are wary, and this is a sanctuary for wariness. The sounds here are not loud, they are textured. The first thing that catches your ear, a subtle anchor in the quiet, is the thump, thump, thump of a mortar and pestle from the back room, where someone is grinding spices. It's a wonderfully mundane, rhythmic sound, a slow pulse of domesticity against the backdrop of the wild, empty desert. This is, in a way, the central sound of the silk routes, the preparation of food. After all, the trade routes weren't just about luxury silk and spices. They were about the absolute necessity of sustenance. You remember that crocodile, dung sunscreen your companion, tried to sell you back in the Nile Valley. It's a miracle you've made it this far. And now, finally, there's the promise of a cooked meal and, perhaps more importantly, truly clean water. You move to a bench against the wall, the wood smooth and cool beneath your hand. The few other patrons barely look up. They are mostly merchants, a few local guides, and maybe a professional bodyguard or two, all slumped in the same posture of quiet exhaustion. One of the men, perhaps a merchant from Sogdia. Historians still argue whether Sogdian was the true lingua franca of the Central Asian route before Turkic languages took over, is slowly running his finger along the rim of a shallow metal cup, creating a soft, almost hypnotic droning vibration. You don't know what he's thinking about. Maybe the price of jade. Maybe his family. Maybe whether the donkey he bought 3 weeks ago will finally stop eating his map. It doesn't matter. The sound is utterly devoid of anxiety. Think about the materials of this room. Every sound is dampened. The walls are thick, absorbing the harshness. The tables are rough hewn wood, but not polished, so there's no sharp clatter of pottery. The light is oil-based, and that tiny, contained flame makes its own soft, almost inaudible flickering sound, a visual texture that soothes the mind. This isn't the boisterous, drunken inn you see in European movies. This is a place where every person is profoundly relieved to simply be not moving. A waiter moving with the slow, shuffling grace of someone who has served 1,000 caravans, places a large, earthenware jug of water and a single cup near you. There is no sharp clink, just the gentle scrape of the earthenware on the packed earth floor and the sigh of the water as it settles. This is one of the mainstream historical facts that often gets overlooked. The absolute premium on silence and slow movement in these desert edge communities. Conserving energy was survival. Loud, fast motion was a sign of stress or danger. Therefore, the very atmosphere of a respectable tavern was one of mandatory, gentle quiet. You watch as a traveling artisan who specializes in the repair of brass weights used for measuring spices carefully empties his small satchel onto a cloth on the floor. The sound is a low, dull tumble of metal, not a crash, but a muffled, reassuring plink as the weights settle. He's not doing anything quickly. He's simply laying out his tools. This leads us to a quirky tidbit. Many Silk Road merchants carried a second set of weights, often intentionally slightly inaccurate, for use in non-tax transactions in remote areas. It was a universally understood, low-stakes form of cheating that everyone simply factored into the price, adding a tiny, almost imperceptible layer of gentle humor to their negotiations. As you close your eyes for a moment, you realize the tavern has a natural, gentle acoustical dampening system. The thick roof, made of layers of reeds and mud, absorbs any sound traveling upward. The floor, compacted earth, muffles footfalls. The very construction of the building acts as a primitive noise-canceling technology, built specifically for the weary traveler. You let the tension drain from your shoulders, imagining that all the anxieties of the road, the fear of sandstorms, the dread of paying too much for a sack of salt, the minor political worry about which local chieftain you must flatter, are being absorbed by the cool, thick walls around you. The scent of cooking is becoming clearer. It is likely nothing complex, perhaps a thick lentil soup, slowly simmering over a low fire, or flatbread being gently laid against the hot side of a clay oven Els tanner or tander. The sound of the bread is almost a soft hiss, followed by the very gentle, almost intimate puff as the steam escapes the cooked dough. This isn't the intense roar of a modern fryer. It is the slow, continuous warmth of a sustained, low fire. You can almost feel the dry heat radiating from the oven's mouth, a pocket of warmth that contrasts perfectly with the room's prevailing coolness. You take a sip of water. It's cool, slightly mineral, tasting, and immensely satisfying. You hear a sound now that you couldn't hear before, the soft, rhythmic sigh of someone next to you, perhaps a camel driver, already deep asleep on a nearby mat. His breathing is steady, low, and perfectly unconcerned. This is the low-stakes gossip we came for, not whispered secrets of empire, but the gentle communication of exhaustion. The tavern soundscape is a study in deceleration. Everything here is designed to slow you down, to tell your nervous system that the danger is gone. The wind is silenced. The sun is blocked. The only required activity is rest. Imagine a group of 4 men at a table near the entrance. They aren't talking loudly. Their voices are low, pitched just high enough to carry across the 3 feet separating them, but not high enough to cross the room. You can't make out the words, but the sound of their conversation is a steady, reassuring burble, a low, melodic vibration of human connection. They are likely negotiating, not with urgency, but with the endless patience required for long-distance trade. They discuss the weight-to-value ratio of cinnamon sticks versus the current cost of transporting them through the Pamir Mountains. It is a slow, methodical, deeply boring conversation that you find profoundly comforting. If they were talking about revolution, their voices would be sharp, but they are talking about margin and logistics, so their voices are round and soft. The only genuinely sharp sound in the room comes from the faint, distant clink of the chain on the well outside, where someone is still drawing water for the animals. Even that sound is softened by the mud walls, reaching you as a delicate, almost chime-like echo. You wonder briefly about the nature of the gossip they might share. Perhaps news that the market in Samarkand is glutted with glass beads, or that a new tax collector has been appointed 300 miles to the east. These are anxieties measured in the small currency of commerce, not in the dramatic currency of war. You close your eyes again, listening to the mortar and pestle, the rhythmic breathing, and the low, vibrational hum of the table of merchants. You are safe. You are still. You are completely and wonderfully unremarkable. And that is exactly what you needed. You realize that a good Silk Roots tavern didn't just sell water, it sold silence, wrapped in the subtle odors of dinner and dust. The simple fact is that the silence here is not empty. It's full. It's filled with the low, frequency sounds that the desert strips away. The desert is all high, frequency the sharp whine of the wind, the crunch of sand underfoot, the relentless, piercing hiss of the sun's glare. Inside this tavern, you are enveloped in the low, frequency world of comfort. The slow drag of a broom over the packed earth, the sound of someone chewing their bread methodically, the gentle tink of water, dripping from an imperfectly sealed wineskin, hung near the wall. These are all sounds of maintenance, consumption, and rest. They are the sonic equivalent of a heavy blanket. You find yourself observing the details of the lamp next to you. It's a simple clay dish, the wick floating in oil, and it emits a light that is both warm and completely non-intrusive. The light itself seems to hush the room, and the oil it burns. It's probably sesame, or maybe even whale oil, depending on which branch of the route you're on. Another tiny commodity that has traveled an absurd distance just to give you this soft glow. The scent is slightly heavy, adding to the somnolent atmosphere. You lean your head back against the cool wall, feeling the rough texture of the sun-baked clay against your cheek, and the silence seems to deepen. The rhythmic grinding from the back room continues. Thump, 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 thump. It's almost a lullaby. The sound of someone efficiently, but not urgently, preparing the next meal. The person doing the grinding isn't listening to an exciting podcast. They are probably contemplating the structural integrity of the pestle, or perhaps the philosophical meaning of the lentil, which, let's be honest, is the most boring staple of the ancient world. You could set your watch by that thump. It's a sonic promise. The world is steady, the work is continuing, and you don't need to worry about either. This kind of work is a mainstream historical fact. The entire infrastructure of the Silk routes depended on this consistent, low-level labor of hospitality. The unseen people who constantly processed food, cleaned the water skins, and kept the lamps lit. They were the engine of the pause. The Sogdian merchant at the nearby table shifts, and the creak of the wooden bench is surprisingly gentle. A deep, slow groan, rather than a sharp screech. He settles back down and lets out a profound, satisfied sigh. This sigh is a piece of low-stakes gossip all its own. It tells you, without words, that his day is done, the deal is finished, and he has successfully navigated another day without incident. It is a tiny, personal announcement of peace. You find a moment of gentle humor in the realization that the peak of Silk Road drama isn't usually a sword fight, but the merchant realizing, only after the deal is done, that he has miscounted his small denomination copper coins by 2. The horror. As the evening darkens, the air outside cools dramatically, and you can now hear the very subtle hum of the wind against the top edge of the thick walls, a distant, continuous whisper that can't penetrate the interior but merely brushes the surface. It is the sound of the world out there, the world of movement and danger held at bay. Inside, everything is an echo of deceleration. The tavern owner is now quietly banking the cooking fire. You hear the soft, dull scrape of an iron implement against the clay hearth, followed by the faint hush of ash being gently pushed over the glowing embers. It's a process of slowing down the heat, of conserving energy for the morning. It's a gorgeous acoustic detail. No sharp, sudden movements. Everything is designed for the long haul, even the act of putting the fire to sleep. You realize that a lot of what we romanticize about the Silk routes, the speed, the exotic goods, the daring, is actually contradicted by the necessary slowness of the travel itself. Try moving fast in a desert, you die. So, the tavern, by enforcing slowness, is enforcing life. This leads to a deep, nerdy, and quirky tidbit, the common practice, especially in Central Asian caravanserais, of coating the mud, brick walls with a layer of fine, sifted silt mixed with a very weak animal glue. This wasn't just for insulation. It gave the walls a matte, porous finish that absorbed sound waves, creating that unique acoustic dampening effect you are enjoying now. It turned a room into a sanctuary of low sound. The Sogdian merchant is now gently rubbing his tired feet, and the sound of his rough canvas shoe scratching lightly against his woolen trousers is a small, quiet, utterly domestic noise that brings a strange sense of comfort. You can now hear the gentle patter of sand falling from the roof. Not a storm, but simply the fine dust that has collected on the flat roof during the day, now contracting in the evening cool and settling slowly. It's a delicate, continuous sifting sound, like dry rain. It's the desert releasing its hold. This phenomenon is something historians still argue about. To what extent did the constant, minor maintenance required by these buildings, the perpetual re-plastering, the sweeping, the re-digging of the cisterns, become a ritual that enforced community and stability along the unstable trade routes? Did the act of constant, boring work, rather than the work itself, create the necessary social cohesion? You decide at this moment that yes, the gentle scrape of the mud mixing hoe is the true sound of ancient globalization. You watch as a young man begins to prepare a hookah or kalian, depending on the local dialect. It's a marvel of brass and glass, and the sound it makes is exquisite. First, the soft, metallic clink of the charcoal being dropped onto the tray. Then, the careful, almost silent sifting of the tobacco mixture. Finally, the long, drawn-out, liquid burble of the water being drawn through the pipe. It is the perfect ASMR sound for an ancient inn, rhythmic, aqueous, and profoundly unhurried. The aroma is equally gentle, a faint, sweet smell of fruit or honey mixed with the wood smoke. It's an invitation to pause, a physical instruction to inhale slowly and exhale even slower. The merchant across the room has now produced a small, carved wooden box. He opens it, and the hinges make a beautifully engineered, whispering squeak. Inside, he appears to be counting tiny, smooth river stones, perhaps tali stones, or perhaps just his personal worry beads. The sound of the stones being gently rattled within the box is like a very quiet rainstick, a low, constant murmur that speaks of accounting, memory, and the slow, internal processing of a long day's work. This is the truth of the silk routes. It was less about adventure and more about arithmetic. You hear the tavern owner approach a table and place down a bowl of the lentil soup. The sound is the subtle slosh of the thick liquid as he sets it down, followed by the low, satisfied sigh of the recipient. The man begins to eat, and the only sound is the quiet click of his wooden spoon against the earthenware bowl. The act of eating is slow, deliberate, and savoring. Nobody here is rushing through dinner to get to a party. They are savoring the moment of warmth, the temporary victory over hunger and the road. This gentle, repetitive sound of quiet consumption is, oddly, the most reassuring sound of all. It's the sound of life continuing, slowly and safely. You feel the deep, heavy weight of your own fatigue pressing down on you, and you realize you have barely moved, yet you are the most relaxed you have been in months. The quiet of the tavern is not a lack of sound. It is a composition of gentle sound, a curated experience of auditory peace. It's the opposite of the high energy, anxiety-inducing sensory overload of modern life. It is the sound of deep rest. The world outside has completely dissolved, replaced by the dense, comforting envelope of the tavern. You are now fully attuned to the sounds of simple comfort, a gentle orchestra of small noises that signal everything is well, predictable, and slow. The most prominent sound is the soft, rhythmic sloshing coming from the corner where a large, woven basket is being meticulously sorted. This is the wool handler preparing a small, high-quality batch of felt for the morning market. Every few seconds, You hear the muffled thwack as he presses the wool fibers together. This low impact sound, the gentle compression, is utterly devoid of alarm. It's the sound of texture and patience. It tells a small, quiet story. This wool will become a thick, warm blanket, and the process to get there requires no sudden movements, only persistent, soft pressure. Next to the sloshing, a different, more metallic sound emerges: the quiet, continuous fizzing and sputtering of the oil lamps. If you listen closely, you can hear the oil bubbling slightly as it's drawn up the wick, and the tiny, almost musical hiss of the flame consuming the fuel. It's a very intimate sound, one that requires your ear to lean in slightly, and it fills the immediate space around the lamp with a low, vibrant energy that is immediately contrasted by the still air of the room. This gentle combustion is the sound of light being made, a simple comfort that pushes back the oppressive darkness of the desert night. A mainstream historical fact often forgotten in the drama of trade is that the value of lighting oil, whether it was rendered animal fat, sesame, or even olive oil if you were far enough west, was enormous. Merchants dedicated significant capacity to transporting it, because these quiet, reliable lights were essential for the boring, necessary work of accounting that kept the entire trade system running. You realize the merchant counting his worry stones earlier might have actually been double, checking his tallies in the gentle light, a subtle act of trust in the efficacy of a tiny, expensive flame. The tavern cat, a mangy but clearly successful creature, is now making its rounds. Its footsteps are utterly silent on the packed earth floor, but you hear a distinct, long, drawn-out purr. It's a deep, continuous, internal motor of contentment, audible only when it pauses near a table. This purr is a piece of low-stakes gossip all its own. It signals that the food scraps are good, the mice are plentiful, and the overall management of the establishment is high quality. The cat's unconcerned existence is a biological validation of the tavern's safety. You could, if you listened very closely, hear the soft rattle of its tiny claws retracting and extending as it needs a warm spot on the wool handler's discarded satchel. Now, focus on the kitchen, which is mostly hidden by a heavy tapestry. The dominant sound here is the low, sustained hush of the simmering pot. The heat is so gentle that the contents are not boiling rapidly, only sending up small, slow bubbles that burst with an almost imperceptible plop. This slow, moist heat permeates the air with the smell of cumin and coriander, and its sound is one of unrushed nourishment. You can picture the cook, not frantic, not shouting orders, but standing there, stirring the contents perhaps every 15 minutes with a long, wooden paddle that makes a soft, squelching drag through the thick stew. The low, volume conversation from the merchant table is continuing, but it has shifted. They are no longer discussing price or logistics. They are now simply muttering. It's the sound of tired consensus, a verbal winding down. One man repeats a phrase softly, perhaps the wind was hard that day, and another offers a low grunt of agreement. It's not dialogue. It's a mutual acknowledgement of shared fatigue, a bonding ritual conducted entirely in the softest possible vocal register. You realize that the entire purpose of this noise is not to communicate information, but simply to maintain a connection until sleep takes over. A quirky tidbit related to these sounds: many desert travelers, weary from the constant high, pitched whistle of the wind, would carry small, smooth, flat river stones wrapped in cloth. They found that holding the stones and listening to the faint, dull clack they made, when gently shifted in the palm, was the only way to recalibrate their hearing back to the low, comforting sounds of civilization. It was a primitive form of acoustic therapy. You shift slightly on your wooden bench, and the fabric of your worn woolen tunic whispers as it rubs against the wood. It's a dry, soft sound, like the brush of a moth's wing. Even your own movement contributes to the soundscape of gentle attrition. This whispering of the cloth reminds you that everything here is tired. The travelers, the wool, the wood, the very air itself, all settled into a comfortable stasis. Historians still argue whether the absence of loud music in these remote outposts, compared to the boisterous music often found in port cities or major urban centers, was a matter of economic necessity. Musicians were expensive, or a cultural preference rooted in the need for profound nightly rest. You lean towards the latter. The silence here feels intentional, curated, a premium product in a noisy world. The person who was grinding spices earlier has finished. You hear the final, careful scrape of the pestle against the mortar's clay sides, followed by a light, dusting hush as the finely ground mixture is poured into a leather pouch. The space where the rhythmic thump used to be is now filled by a new sound, the low, resonant tinkle of water being poured from a height. Someone is washing their hands and face after the work, and the sound of the stream of water hitting the large basin is a clean, flowing sound that momentarily breaks the static atmosphere. It is quickly replaced by the soft, damp squeak of a linen towel being wrung out. Out by the well, the donkey that belongs to the Sogdian merchant lets out a soft, breathy snuffle. It's a deeply tired, almost resigned sound, far from the irritating bray you hear in the morning. It's the sound of an animal that has finally accepted its fate to carry heavy things, and that fate, for the next 8 hours, involves nothing but standing still. This tiny animal sound adds a layer of ambient reassurance. All of nature, it seems, has agreed to be calm. You catch a glimpse of the tavern owner, now seated on a stool, gently winding a long, narrow strip of leather around a wooden spindle. This is simply repair work, fixing a broken strap on a saddle or a sandal. The sound is the slow, continuous, gentle squeak and rub of the leather being manipulated by calloused hands. It's a sound that promises longevity and practical preparation. No one is talking about philosophy or destiny. They are simply making sure their gear holds up for the next leg of the journey. This focus on mundane, necessary tasks is the most potent anti-anxiety medicine the silk route offered. You realize with a gentle chuckle that this entire evening could be titled "The Profoundly Unexciting Lives of People Who Move Things." The only potential source of a sharp, high-pitched sound, the metal rims of the wheelbarrows or carts outside, is completely neutralized. Every wheel is likely wrapped in thick, felted wool or leather, and every metal hinge has been thoroughly oiled with animal fat before the journey. The travelers learned centuries ago that high-pitched squeaks equal lost sleep, and sleep equals survival. The entire world of the caravan is engineered for low noise operation. The low, rhythmic sound of the wool handler continues. Thwack, pause, thwack. It's a perfect sonic metronome for falling asleep. You feel your eyelids growing heavy, and the sounds of the room begin to blur, losing their distinct edges and becoming one continuous, textured hum. The water slosh, the soft click of the tarly stones, the faint bubbling of the lamp oil, the cat's internal motor. They all merge into a single, low-volume vibrational field. You are now surrounded by the sound of settling, and that is perhaps the truest, deepest comfort this tavern can offer. The world is large and full of danger, but right here, right now, in this small, thick-walled box of cool air, the world is only about slow breathing and soft sounds. You are completely, gently, and utterly detained by peace. As your consciousness drifts to the edge of sleep, the sounds become less physical and more atmospheric. You are now tuned into the water seller's rumors, the lowest tier of information exchange, where the only thing moving faster than the camels is the gentle drift of barely interesting gossip. The conversations you now register are all about commodities, prices, and the surprisingly undramatic lives of other travelers. From a group of guides near the doorway, you hear a phrase repeated softly, a perfect piece of low-stakes gossip. The silver market in Kashgar is soft, but the price of tea bricks has held. This is the core of their world. Not wars, but stability of the tea brick. The tea brick, a dense, compacted block of processed tea leaves, was a mainstream historical fact that served not only as a beverage, but as a form of currency, a highly portable, standardized commodity. The guides are not worried about the fall of an empire. They are worried about the micro-economics of a mildly caffeinated square. The sound of the word held, pronounced softly, a gentle sigh of relief, is the most reassuring word you could hear. It means they won't lose their shirts on the next leg of the journey. A short distance away, a traveler is speaking to the tavern owner. His voice is a low rumble, and you only catch fragments. He is complaining about a weird traveler he encountered 2 stops back. The traveler, apparently, was a scholar who insisted on carrying an enormous, fragile collection of glass vials containing different colored sands. The complaint is not that the scholar was dangerous, but that he was annoying to travel alongside, as every step required excruciating care. The traveler summarizes his issue with a soft, exasperated exhale. He slowed the pace for 3 villages just to collect a handful of red dirt. Red dirt. This gentle exasperation is the most exciting thing that has happened on this part of the road. It's the perfect, quirky tidbit. The most memorable travelers aren't the ones with gold, but the ones with peculiar, pointless obsessions. The scholar's ridiculous sand collection becomes the central piece of gossip because it provides a quiet, shared moment of gentle humor. You almost hear the man shaking his head, and the soft rustle of his linen tunic underscores his mild frustration. The sound of the scribe from the far corner now cuts through the low hum, but only just. He is using a stylus or perhaps a trimmed reed pen, and the sound of the tip gliding across the dry parchment is a continuous, fine scratching. It is a sound of order, of record, keeping, of slow, methodical labor. This scratch is the sound of bureaucracy in the desert, the least dramatic sound imaginable. He isn't writing poetry or state secrets. He is likely writing 3 bolts Babylonian linen, 1 bag salt, 5 copper coins paid to Hakim for repair of donkey harness. The mundane nature of the task is profoundly comforting. You hear the merchant from Sogdia, the one who was sighing earlier, now talking to himself in a low murmur. He is debating the merits of taking the northern route through the mountains, or the southern route across the flats. He's not speaking to anyone, just sorting through his internal logistics. His voice is so low that the vibrations barely leave his throat. Mountains, too cold, but less tax. Flats faster, but more dust. It's the boring calculus of trade, and the sound of his internal struggle is a soft, continuous drone, like a distant swarm of very tired bees. Historians still argue whether the speed of information travel along the Silk Roads was more important than the accuracy of the information. Was a rumor about a soft silver market in Kashgar more valuable if it arrived fast, or if it arrived slowly, but with verification? In this tavern, where every piece of news has been filtered through 5 different dialects and 6 different levels of exhaustion, the information is slow, low volume, and typically 3 weeks old. It's safe. It can no longer cause panic. Listen to the sounds of the communal water cistern in the middle of the room. It's a large, heavy clay pot, and the ladle is a simple, hollowed gourd. When someone scoops water, the sound is the soft gurgle and slosh of the water being displaced, followed by the quiet drip, drip, drip from the ladle as they lift it. This sound is a universal constant. It is the sound of life, measured out slowly and carefully. When the ladle is replaced, it doesn't clatter. It makes a soft, resonant thud against the side of the ceramic jar, a deep, round note that signals the completion of a small, necessary task. The gentle humor of the room continues to emerge in the gossip. Now, the subject is donkey feed. Apparently, a merchant named Barzok attempted to feed his donkeys dried fish rather than traditional grain, believing it would give them strength. The consensus in the tavern, delivered in soft, amused snorts of laughter, is that Barzok is an idiot and his donkeys now smell like a distant coastline. The only danger involved is the danger of being slightly ridiculous, and the only punishment is the gentle, pervasive gossip that follows you for 50 miles. The low, guttural chuckle of the tavern owner as he hears this story is a deep, resonating sound, the closest thing to a loud noise that this room will tolerate. The air is filled with the scent of old, dry leather and the faint, sweet smell of the tobacco from the Kalyan earlier. The sounds associated with leather maintenance are now noticeable. The soft, continuous rubbing of a piece of wax, or fat being worked into a saddle strap, and the occasional, gentle snapping sound as a thread is pulled tight during a repair. These are sounds of conservation, of making things last in a harsh world. They are the acoustic backdrop to not buying anything new, which is a surprisingly comforting thought. You are now simply a vessel, absorbing the slow, low-frequency hum of this place. The rattle of dice, if they are being played, is not the sharp, aggressive sound of gambling. It is a soft, muffled tumble, because the dice are likely made of carved bone or wood, and they are being shaken and dropped onto a piece of soft felt, not a hard table. The game is slow, the stakes are low, perhaps a single piece of dried fruit, or the right to the last cup of the good water. It is a game played to pass the time, not to cause stress. It is a quaint, fringe tidbit that the most popular game along the Eastern Silk Route was a simple stone placement game called Go, which is silent, slow, and requires immense, unhurried concentration. The perfect game for a weary traveler. The overall volume of the tavern is actually decreasing as people finish their small tasks and curl up on their mats. The low-stakes gossip is fading into internal monologue. The last word you can clearly distinguish is spoken by one of the guides, a soft, almost whispered word. Tomorrow? It's not a word of dread or excitement, simply a statement of fact. Tomorrow they will move again. But tonight they will not. The final sound of this section is the soft, yielding sigh of a bedroll being unfolded, and the slow, deep release of air as a body finally surrenders to rest. The sound of the silk routes is ultimately the sound of the human body finally relaxing. And that is the most soothing sound of all. You are now almost asleep, surrounded by the gentle, fading echoes of a world that moves too slowly to be stressful. The low-frequency hum of the tavern has now established itself as a constant, safe environment. Any new sound that enters this space is immediately absorbed and dampened. Now, as you drift further, you start to filter the merchant's mundane complaints, the low-stakes anxieties that define the everyday perils of the road. These aren't the dramatic woes of lost treasure, but the predictable, irritating annoyances that only sound scary after they've been completely defanged by exhaustion. From a corner, you hear the soft, defeated slapping of a man's sandal against the floor. He's talking about his feet. The complaint, delivered in a tired, low monotone, concerns a truly boring peril of the Silk Road blisters. Specifically, the type of blister that is not life-threatening, not even seriously painful, but simply an inconvenience that adds 2 hours to every day's walk. The sound of his sandal is the gentle, repetitive thwack-slap, a perfect auditory symbol of a man moving slowly, painfully, and predictably. You chuckle internally, finding a gentle humor in the realization that the great Silk Road adventurers were often defeated not by Huns, but by poor foot hygiene. The other sound that rises in this section is the low grumble of a man complaining about bandits. But here's the twist. He's not complaining about being robbed of gold, but being robbed of his sleep. He tells his companion, in a barely audible voice, that the real bandits are the ones who make so much noise while they raid a camp that they wake everyone up, forcing them to lie there, sleepless, waiting for the all clear. The loss of a good night's rest is, to the wary traveler, a far greater tragedy than the loss of a few coins. The sound of his complaint is a continuous, low growl, like a distant thunder cloud that never quite arrives. A mainstream historical fact that supports this mundane reality is the system of qanats, underground aqueducts common across Persia and Central Asia. These were essential for life, but maintaining them was dangerous, time-consuming, and utterly unglamorous work. Merchants' talk wasn't about finding new empires. It was often about which qanat had recently collapsed, forcing a detour that cost an extra day's travel. You hear a soft, dry clapping sound, and you realize it's a merchant softly batting the dust out of his thick woolen rug. A quiet, domestic sound that is a direct response to the boring, pervasive peril of dirt. Dust is the true, relentless enemy of the Silk Road. This brings us to a quirky tidbit, the common caravan practice of tying small, hollowed-out gourds to the back of their carts, not for water, but simply to rattle. The gentle, uneven shake of the gourd acted as a low-level, continuous, non-threatening background noise that actually helped ward off loneliness during the long, silent desert crossings. When the traveler finally arrived at the tavern, the absence of that personalized rattle became part of the transition to rest. The noise they carried, With them was so much more annoying than the gentle hum of the tavern. The scribe's late night task from Section 5 now starts to bleed subtly into this room's atmosphere. The scratch, scratch, scratch of his reed pen is an anchor of order. He's not a secret agent, he's the caravan's accountant, meticulously preparing the bills of lading. The sounds he makes are a perfect counterpoint to the complaints. The scratch of the pen against parchment is the sound of verification, the sound of the world being measured, counted, and made predictable. You hear the quiet tinkling of small bells, not the loud brass camel bells from outside, but tiny, silver ornaments attached to a female traveler's ankle, now making a delicate sound as she shifts position on her mat. It's a sweet, fragile sound that is immediately muffled as she pulls a blanket over her legs. This small, fading jingle is a quiet reminder of the gentle details of civilization that persist even in this rough setting. It's a sound that promises refinement exists somewhere far away, and that tomorrow someone will be carefully selling a bolt of fine silk. Historians still argue whether the complaints recorded by traveling merchants, often found scribbled on the margins of financial ledgers, were primarily expressions of genuine hardship or a culturally accepted way to bond with fellow travelers. Did the man complaining about his blisters genuinely suffer, or was he participating in the low-stakes social ritual of communal lamentation? In the gentle quiet of the tavern, you realize the answer doesn't matter. The sound of the complaint is more important than the content. It's a soft release of pressure, a shared, non-confrontational moment of mild stress reduction. You hear the tavern owner's son softly closing up the small windows that face the desert. The process is slow. The quiet click as he unlatches a wooden cover, the soft whoosh as he pushes it gently into place, and the dull, muffled thud as he secures the latch. Each sound is a deliberate act of sealing the quiet in and the wildness out. The air suddenly feels heavier, warmer, and more stable. The sound of the hookah is gone, replaced by the faint, low gurgle of someone drinking from a leather water skin. The water skin makes a soft, almost rubbery squeak as it's squeezed, followed by the deep, continuous swallowing sound. It's a very visceral, biological sound of relief, stripped of any drama. The final, gentle sound in this list of mundane complaints is the soft, rhythmic sigh of the small charcoal brazier the Sogdian merchant is using to keep his hands warm. The charcoal is banked, so it's not crackling or popping. It's just gently oxidizing, sending up an almost inaudible, soft breathy hiss of contained warmth. It's the sound of heat being conserved, another auditory cue that everything in this room is about slowness, stability, and survival through careful conservation. You feel a wave of profound relief. The drama of the outside world is officially closed for the night. The tavern has now settled into a phase of deep, sustained quiet, dominated by the scribe's late night task. You focus on that quiet corner where the caravan's accountant, or katib, is working. The light cast by his oil lamp is a small, steady pool, and the only sound he generates is the continuous, low-volume scraping and scratching of his writing implement. It's the perfect sound of boring logistics, the acoustic expression of the trade route's circulatory system. The sound is not uniform. When he's drawing a line to separate columns, perhaps tracking the fluctuating value of Byzantine gold solidus against local silver coins, the sound is a long, deliberate drag of the stylus. When he's forming tiny, meticulous cuneiform or Pahlavi characters detailing a shipment of saffron, the sound becomes a quick, dry, almost tick-like series of taps and scritches. This meticulous rhythm is a calming reminder that the vast, exciting world of the Silk Road ultimately rests on a foundation of accurate, slow paperwork. A mainstream historical fact, the widespread adoption of paper, invented in China and slowly spreading west, dramatically changed the soundscape of trade. Before paper, scribes used clay tablets, which created a dull thudding sound when imprinted, or vellum, which made a tough, slightly creaking sound when written on. Paper, however, offers that unique, gentle, dry scratch, the sound of fragile, portable order. The scribe is not working on state secrets. He is simply recording the transfer of 3 bags of pepper. This sheer mundanity is your lullaby. Now a new sound enters the quiet. The scribe's work requires him to occasionally moisten his pen. You hear the soft, quick swish of the reed pen being dipped into the small inkwell, a liquid, cleansing sound that momentarily breaks the dryness of the scratching. Then the careful, brief tap, tap, tap against the lip of the inkwell to shake off the excess ink before he returns to the parchment. It is a slow, methodical ritual, repeated perhaps once every minute, a tiny self-correcting cycle that promises precision and continuity. You realize that the scribes themselves are a quirky tidbit of the Silk Route. They were often the only people in a caravan who were fully literate in multiple scripts and capable of complex mathematics, yet their social status was surprisingly low. They were expensive, but merely glorified clerks. They were the quiet heroes of predictable commerce. Their most dramatic moment of the day was likely realizing they had transposed 2 numbers in a massive tally, followed by a soft, internal sigh of defeat. The silence around the scribe is a gentle reverence for the necessary, boring work he represents. Historians still argue whether the complex system of credit and debt recorded by these scribes, the quiet system of bills of exchange and promissory notes that allowed merchants to travel without enormous amounts of physical gold, was more significant to the success of the routes than the physical goods themselves. Was the scratch of the pen more valuable than the scent of the spice it described? As you listen to the gentle scritch, you feel the vast, invisible network of trust and debt settling over the continent, woven together by a few quiet strokes of a reed pen. The scent of the oil lamp next to the scribe is strong, heavy with a hint of burned sugar from the wick. The heat it emits causes the parchment on which he writes to crinkle very softly. You hear a delicate, almost papery shush as he turns a new sheet. This is the sound of time passing, measured out in completed columns of trade volume. Suddenly, a slight interruption, the scribe yawns. It's a deep, soundless, inward yawn, followed by a soft, long exhale that lasts for several seconds, a quiet whoosh of air that settles the tension in his chest. It's a low-stakes moment of human vulnerability, a gentle reminder that even the most meticulous logistics expert is just a weary traveler waiting for sleep. After the exhale, the scratching resumes, just slightly slower, slightly less energetic, a perfect example of a decelerated rhythm. The scribe reaches for a small piece of chalk to make a quick calculation on a tiny slate he keeps next to his work. The chalk makes a quick, dry squeak as it hits the slate, a sound so dry it seems to absorb all the moisture in the air around it. He quickly rubs it out with the pad of his thumb, creating a soft, dry smudge sound. It's the sound of transient mathematics, a small, contained problem solved and wiped away, leaving no trace but the scratch of the permanent ledger. The final sound from the scribe's corner is the gentle slump of his shoulders. He has completed a major column. You hear him slowly setting his pen down on the table, a soft tap, and then the smooth, dry hiss of the leather cover being pulled across his ledger book. The night's accounting is temporarily done. His lamp, now unwatched, begins to burn a little unevenly, and the gentle, liquid fizz of the oil suddenly seems a bit louder in the new quiet. You realize that the entire tavern was holding its breath, waiting for the tedious certainty of the accounting to finish. Now that it is done, the world can truly sleep. The sound of the silk root is, therefore, the sound of the pencil dropping. With the accounts now settled and the scribe asleep, a new, gentle layer of sound emerges, quiet games and sleepy music. This isn't the loud, foot-stomping revelry you might find in a port town. This is music that feels like a quiet sigh, played by a single musician for a deeply tired audience. From the far corner, you now register the continuous, low, volume presence of a stringed instrument, perhaps a dotar or a rabab. The musician is not attempting a virtuoso performance. He is playing a melody that is repetitive, slow, and deliberately devoid of dynamic change. The notes are soft, plucked with the fleshy part of the finger, creating a sound that is rich in vibration but low in volume. Each note seems to hang in the cool, still air for an extra moment before fading. This is the ultimate sleep music, a sonic hammock, where no note is surprising and no rhythm demands attention. It's a continuous, gentle plink, plink, plink that serves to fill the silence without challenging the rest. A quirky tidbit about this musician: he is likely being paid not in coin, but in a small amount of rare, high-quality tobacco or a promise of easy passage on the next caravan. His value is tied not to the brilliance of his song, but to its consistency and its ability to act as a sonic balm. His purpose is to make you forget you are listening. He is the quiet architect of communal exhaustion. Before the music completely settles in, you hear the sounds of quiet games. Near the fire pit, two men are playing backgammon or tavla, as it was widely known. The dice, as suspected, are not slammed. They are gently tumbled inside a small leather cup. The sound is a soft, dry shake, shake, followed by the dull pat of the dice being released onto a folded piece of felt. When a player moves a piece, it is not clicked aggressively. The sound is a soft, muffled thud as the smooth bone or wooden disc is shifted on the wooden board. The pace of the game is agonizingly slow, conducted in long stretches of silence. The most dramatic sound is the low, thoughtful sigh of the player contemplating his next move. A low, stakes sound of intellectual effort. A mainstream historical fact is that these quiet board-based games were essential social lubrication across cultural boundaries. A Persian merchant could play tavla with a Chinese silk broker without speaking a shared language. The rhythm of the pieces moving, the silent contemplation, and the soft sounds of the game created a shared, low-stakes language of leisure. It was a way to conduct diplomacy through shared, repetitive, and very quiet distraction. You notice the sounds of the water cistern again, but now they are less frequent. The occasional gurgle and slosh of the ladle is louder, now against the background quiet. but quickly absorbed by the thick mud walls. The sound seems to draw attention to the sheer volume of stillness in the rest of the room. Historians still argue whether the quiet melodies played in these remote taverns were preserved versions of ancient folk songs, or whether they were entirely improvised each night to match the ambient mood of deep fatigue. Given the lack of reliable notation and the need to constantly cater to a shifting, exhausted audience, it's likely they were simple, slow improvisations, music designed to be heard but not remembered. The gentle, repetitive rhythm is a promise that nothing is happening, and that is a truly glorious promise. The musician pauses to gently tune his instrument. The sound of the peg being turned is a slow, high-pitched squeak, a temporary, gentle protest of the wood against the tension of the string. It's quickly followed by the soft, vibrating twang as he tests the note. This sound is a reminder of the fragility of order, that even this deep, restorative quiet must be constantly, gently maintained. The air is cool now, and you hear the soft shifting of heavy linen or wool blankets as travelers pull them closer. The fabric makes a dry, quiet drag sound, like rubbing two palms together very slowly. This is the sound of bodies finding their final, most comfortable position, a communal sound of surrender to gravity and rest. You think back to the harsh, high-frequency sounds of the desert, the sharp whine of the wind, the clank of a dropped camel bell. This tavern is the acoustic opposite of the road. It is a chamber of low tones, muted textures, and predictable rhythms. The soft, continuous plink of the dotar, the slow thud of the backgammon pieces, the quiet sighing of the sleeping men. It all blends into a perfect, low-volume drone. You are safe. You are still. You are suspended in the most gentle, boring moment of ancient history. The quiet music has done its job, turning all stress into a simple, sonic texture. The gentle music has finally faded to an almost imperceptible whisper, and now you begin the final, slow journey, drifting off to distant bells. The tavern itself has run out of new sounds to offer. The only audible noises are the ones that signify deep, unchanging sleep, and the ambient sounds that filter in from the quiet night outside. You shift one last time on your simple mat. The friction of the woven fibers makes a single, soft, dry scrubbing sound, a final acknowledgement of your presence before you become still. The air is now profoundly cool, and the heavy darkness presses down, carrying only the faintest odors of dust and spent wood smoke. The sound that dominates this final phase is the collective, low-frequency hum of human breathing. It is the sound of an entire room, an entire weary caravan, synchronized in its deepest biological function. The breathing is slow, rhythmic, and occasionally punctuated by a low, soft snort or a gentle sniffle. This is the sound of safety. If anyone were in danger, their breathing would be sharp, fast, and shallow. But this breathing is deep, continuous, and profoundly unconcerned. It's a sonic blanket woven from the exhalations of 20 sleeping travelers. You hear the last vestige of the cooking fire, the very, very faint, dry shifting and settling of the cooling ash in the hearth. It's an almost geological sound, the gentle patter of tiny, cooling particles as the heat finally retreats. It's the sound of the tavern closing its eyes completely. A quirky tidbit that now becomes apparent. The entire mud, brick structure of the tavern, having absorbed the sun's heat all day, and now being completely silent, is contracting slightly in the cool night air. This contraction creates a constant, subtle, almost inaudible creaking and sighing in the walls themselves. The tavern is literally relaxing around you, emitting tiny sounds of structural relief. Now, you begin to hear the sounds of the distant night. Outside the thick walls, the air is dead calm. The sounds that travel the furthest are the low, metallic tinkling of the camel bells. They are miles away, perhaps on another caravan, just arriving at the oasis, or maybe just the bells on the caravan you arrived with, now unburdened and settling down for the night. The sound is delicate, intermittent, and greatly softened by distance. Tink, pause, tink, tink, pause. It's a beautifully randomized metronome, keeping time with the vast emptiness of the desert. These bells, a mainstream historical fact that guided caravans through featureless terrain, now serve only as a gentle, remote reminder that the world exists. But it's too far away to matter. Historians still argue whether the purpose of the decorative bells and chains on the livestock was primarily practical dummers, to locate stray animals, or whether they had a strong spiritual significance, a gentle sound to ward off spirits in the dead of night. Tonight, as you hear the distant, softened chimes, you realize the bells are now serving a purely psychological function, a continuous, low, volume sonic tether to reality, ensuring you don't feel completely alone in the overwhelming quiet. The desert is a place of absolute silence, and a little distant sound, however boring, is deeply comforting. You close your eyes, and the final sound that penetrates your consciousness is the faint, dry rubbing of the fine desert sand, being carried by the very highest layer of the atmosphere. It's a sound like an old woman whispering a secret you can't quite catch. It is the sound of the world's quiet, continuous background work. You are no longer a traveler. You are simply a mass of gentle, low-frequency sound. The rhythm of your own breathing is now perfectly matched to the rhythm of the snoring camel driver next to you, and the slow tink of the distant bells. The boredom has won. The exhaustion has settled. The low-stakes gossip is gone. The mundane complaints are forgotten, and the sleepy music has dissolved. All that remains is the profound, beautiful quiet of a history that only had the energy to be gentle. You are suspended in the stillness. The quiet has deepened now, settling over you like the thick, cool air itself. You are completely still. Let the gentle weight of the last few hours press down, not with anxiety, but with profound, wary relief. Feel the cool air against your face, and let the small, distant sounds, the soft, intermittent chime, the gentle, rhythmic hum of the shared breathing, pull you down, further and further, into the soft, yielding earth. There is nowhere else to go tonight. There is nothing else to worry about. The only action required is to simply be suspended in this perfect pocket of ancient, boring peace. Let your mind become as smooth and quiet as the stone worry beads carried by the merchant. The dust has settled. The accounts are finished. The journey is paused. Breathe out slowly. Breathe in peace. Everything is exactly as it should be. You are safe. You are still. Sleep is waiting.